Hare Krishna, everyone. A little louder and energetic is just, yes. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we'll be starting with our special seminar today. Okay, that's how Dinal makes an entrance. Okay, so before we start, I just wanted to first do some housekeeping announcements and then introduce the speakers and tell you a little bit about the seminar. So we will start now, and we'll have our lunch at 1:30 p.m., which will be right here in the temple hall. And the seminar will end at 5 p.m. And then again, the part 2 starts on tomorrow, 10 a.m. And it will end around 2 p.m. We'll again serve lunch. So in order to get a certificate, please make sure that you stick around for the entire time. If you have not already registered and your attendance is not taken, please reach out to Dinal, who's sitting right there, who just dropped her phone when entering. So that's Dinal. Okay, so now we'll move on to the seminar. How many of you are single here? Okay. Amla, you're not counted in it. Okay. Okay, and how many of you are married here? Okay, and okay, let me ask you another question. Yeah. All right, so another question that I would want to ask is that how many of you have actually experienced that your intention was nice about something, but you communicated in a way that caused some conflict or a fight? That could be with your coworker, with your friend. Yeah, Himanshu's like not even letting me finish my statement, but yeah. So how many of you have experienced that like just there was some miscommunication? And how many times have you felt that most of the problem was actually coming from the communication, from the way we communicate, the way we interact? Okay, so my husband is also raising the hand. Okay, so this seminar is definitely for you. It's for all individuals, for all single people, for all married people. And I'll let Partha and Uttama Prabhu tell you more about what are the benefits of attending this seminar and how you can apply it in your lives after you're done with the seminar. And now I'd like to introduce Partha Prabhu and Uttama Prabhu. So they are Prabhupada disciples and were initiated in 1973, and they got married at 1971. That's a very long time. Okay, and they live in Sharanagati, and they have done many services. I'll start with Partha Prabhu. Partha Prabhu was a head pujari for 20 years in ISKCON Vancouver and did an amazing service. On top of that, he's been mentoring, he's been guiding, he has been leading this Grihastha Vision Team, which is a service that is that helps all devotees from all phases of life, whether it's like for guiding them for Grihastha Ashram or devotees in Grihastha Ashram. And Uttama Prabhu is also, she has served in deity department. She has also served in as a pujari. She's been into training and teaching and education. And they're a wonderful couple who lead by example on how to have a healthy relationship. And this relationship is not just limited to marriage, but also in other aspects too, whether you're working, whether you have a roommate, or you're married. So I hope, I don't know if I missed anything in introduction. Okay, I did it. Sorry? Yes. So please welcome Partha and Uttama Prabhu, and I'll hand over the mic.
Nima on Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamani. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvashesha Sunyavadi Prasthachade Satarane Panchakalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. So as someone who was a pujari for almost 20 years, head pujari, and who developed what my wife sometimes considered an excessive, compulsive attitude towards punctuality, I would like to thank all of you for being very punctual and on time. It means a lot to me. So thank you for that. Okay. And So today we're going to talk about relationships and why are relationships important. If we just consider, why did Srila Prabhupada come to the Western world? And as pranam mantras, we offer our respects to Srila Prabhupada, who came to the Western world. He came to deliver us from voidism and impersonalism. So, Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of personalism, that God is the person, the supreme person, and we are also persons, and those around us are also persons. And we are, in our constitutional position, we have relationship with the supreme person, and we also have relationships with all those persons, those individuals who are also engaged in Krishna's service. So we have very personal relationships. And as Vishaka was saying, sometimes even in our communication we experience that there's a miscommunication, there's misunderstandings. And that's actually a little bit of impersonalism. We can't actually understand each other. So that's actually a little bit of a manifestation of impersonalism. And one thing we really try to drive home when we're working with couples or individuals is that we understand we're practicing bhakti yoga, and we practice it in the temple, in our sadhana, maybe chanting in our homes. But sometimes we forget that we are meant to practice that personalism also in our daily lives, in our relationships, and especially in our close relationships. And sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect between how we relate to individuals in the mandir and how we relate to them in our home or our private ashram. Sometimes we tend to get a little overly familiar and casual and maybe say things that later we wish we wouldn't have said, some harsh words, some maybe little biting behavior. So there's a disconnect there. So we are going to explore some ways we can kind of narrow that disconnect so we can actually be more personal, because that's extremely important for our progress in sadhana bhakti or devotional service. Do you want to talk about logistics?
So, as within our Vishaka was introducing us, and we have been working in the field of relationships for the last 20 years or so. We started out being asked by the Canadian leaders if we could start some kind of a support program for Grihasthas. And so we started out developing courses for premarital education. And then we've gradually expanded into also doing marriage counseling and other support services. So one thing that we would like to let you know at the beginning of this seminar is that if there's any time you don't want to participate in any exercise, or if you're asked a question and you simply don't want to answer, you just say pass. And we very much honor that, because that indicates that you have good boundaries and you know what works for you. So it's nothing to be embarrassed about, that's something to celebrate. So please feel free for that. And confidentiality is often one of the areas that devotees complain about. They find it hard to open up to others because they're scared they might slip what they said to somebody else, and then it's the prasadam kata, you know. So we always want to be careful in our dealings with others, that when anybody shares something with you that's a little bit personal, it's confidential. And unless you have their permission to share it, we don't. And you might not think it's so private, but we don't know what other people feel, you know, that they'd rather not share with others. So that's just a human dignity. And it's just a, can't think of the word, but it's just a behavior that we should have with everyone. And so, especially in seminars like this, we're talking about relationships, and sometimes you might be breaking up into pairs with somebody. And so, whatever anybody says to us, that's just between, us at the moment. And if you want to share something from the seminar, you can share the principles, and maybe not any, private discussions that go on. Now, I'm not trying to scare you off. We're not going to be getting you to reveal your hearts and all your, inner secrets. It's not that, that's just Vaishnava etiquette I'm bringing up. So we're going to start by making
a couple other things. Most of you probably English is a second language, and we're Western-bodied, very familiar with English. So if you find our speaking a little hard to hear, maybe we're speaking a little too fast, please let us know. Just raise your hand and go like that. Amala Prana, maybe you can do that. Amala Harinam. You're always eager to put your hand up. So if you find we're speaking too fast, just get my attention. And also, if it's not loud enough, also don't hesitate to let us know, because that's impersonal if you don't hear, so we want you to hear. So it's very important that you let us know if there's any problem hearing. Plus, there's also a bit of an echo in here, which makes it a little also challenging to hear. So we'll do our best to speak a little slowly and make sure there's a good volume in the room. Well, speeding up, I said that, yeah.
All right. So we'd like to start with making an intention for our days together. So if you could just write down a few phrases with the intention of what you'd like to get out of this seminar. We're not asking for essays, few words. Just take 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just write it down. Sounds good. You were just giving me feedback, or that was a question? I actually couldn't quite hear it. I'm just asking you to write down a few things. Yeah. And now my next question is, how are you going to know when you've activated that intention? Just write that down. How will you know when you got that out? When you achieve that? Just a couple words. Dinal, I think you're going to have to stay there for another hour. All right, I'd like you to just turn to somebody beside you, pairs or threes, and just share whatever you wrote. This is just the icebreaker to get you connecting to each other.
When I like, oh.
If any of these little groups, if you need a little more time, can you raise your hand? Everyone shared? Okay. Is there 2 or 3 individuals would like to share what they would like to get out of this course? I'm going to take some people who aren't so quick on the draw.
Okay. Thank you. So I wrote Prabhu's 3 things. First one is how can I talk in a way in which nobody feels uncomfortable with me and they're comfortable with me. Second is developing good communication skills. And the last one is how should be my body language while treating with other people. And how will I know I have achieved it? If I have a nice strategy or clear idea what to do, and if I feel more comfortable in dealing with some situation.
So you want to speak beneficially, clearly, and kindly. Oh, very important. And the gentleman behind you?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So my intention for this is that what are the pitfalls and problems that I want to avoid in relationship? Basically to know what I should not be doing. And second is that how to improve relationship to avoid Vaishnava aparad, because we have
Improve relationship to?
Improve to avoid Vaishnava aparad.
Avoid Vaishnava.
Because we have a devotee in home and we deal with them so casually, right? And in the temple we give so much respect. But so how to avoid that? That's one.
So you want to avoid the pitfalls that may cause us to enter into behaviors that are actually displeasing to Krishna and are impersonal.
Yes.
Yeah. One more person? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, what I would like to, how will I know is that reduction in anger and agitation in mind that will show me that, okay, the relation is improved.
Reduction in anger and mind.
Okay, yeah. So you're saying be more, a little more equiposed and peaceful.
Yeah, and not getting agitated in mind.
Yeah.
You may express it, but you still get, right?
Yes.
So that's what I want to just measure it.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Okay. Okay, so again, relationships are important. I'm just going to skip those ones. Is there anyone who can read out loudly and clearly this quote? Ajit is going to do it.
Hare Krishna. Connection. Pure consciousness means to understand that I am very much intimately connected with Krishna as part and parcel, just like my finger is very intimately connected with my body. Intimate. If there is little pain in the finger, I become so much disturbed because I have got intimate connection with this finger. Similarly, we have got intimate connection with Krishna, and we are fallen. Therefore, Krishna also feels little pain, and therefore he comes down. Krishna is feeling pain, so you become Krishna conscious, then Krishna will feel pleasure. That is Krishna consciousness movement.
So that is very, very personal. That even you feel some slight discomfort, some pain in your finger, or you smash your finger with a hammer. Srila Prabhupada is saying Krishna, he actually feels that. And Krishna feels pleasure when you feel happiness. So we are actually very intimately connected with Krishna. And again, that is why our relationships are so important, because when we have harmonious relationships, that actually is pleasing to Krishna. There was a conversation once that, I think it was in Los Angeles, and Srila Prabhupada was talking about love, and he was saying, why does everyone love their body so much? They're exercising and eating healthy, taking care of themselves. He said, no one cares for a dead body, so why are we taking so much care of this body? And then he said, because of the presence of the spirit soul, we take care of the body. And he said, why do we care for the soul? He said, we care for the soul ultimately because the soul is connected with Krishna. And then he expanded that by saying, why do we care for others, our family, our community members, our spouses, partners? And again he said, because of the presence of the soul. And then he said, in this way that love goes to Krishna. So just as Krishna is feeling discomfort or pain, if you're in discomfort or pain, you're feeling pleasure, Krishna, he feels that. So when we have harmonious, kind, compassionate, caring, loving relationships with those around us, that's very pleasing to Krishna. Very interesting, the next thing that Prabhupada said, he was describing how sometimes there is a break in that feeling of connection. There's a break in that flow of compassion and kindness and love. And Srila Prabhupada, he said, that is illusion, that is Maya. So Srila Prabhupada was saying that when we become disconnected from our friends or our spouses, we feel some exchange was really negative and we kind of shut off and withdraw, that's actually painful to Krishna. And it's certainly uncomfortable to us. So Srila Prabhupada's indicating that just as we want to take care of the health of this body, we need to take care of the health of our relationships, because that is a part of our service to Krishna. Like many of you here are married, and how many of you had a fire yajna at your marriage? Anyone have a Vedic sacrifice at your marriage? A few of you. So in the Vedic sacrifice, as the fire ceremony concludes, you probably put a banana in the fire with your husband, right? So that wasn't the end of the Vivaha Yajna. That's actually just the beginning. That sanctifies your marriage, and from that point on, your duty in life is to see that this marriage that we just performed, it's a duty to Lord Vishnu to please him. Yajna means something for the pleasure of Krishna, a sacrifice for the pleasure of Krishna. So our relationships, especially marriage relationship, is meant to be an offering to Krishna, that we cooperate together through thick and thin and hell and high water to somehow satisfy Krishna. And in that way, our relationships become truly spiritual. And that sense of yajna or sacrifice, it becomes integrated into our lives. So we want to explore with you some of the pitfalls that we can avoid, and also some ways we can step over those pitfalls and avoid them.
So, as Vishaka was saying, very often we feel like a passenger in our own interactions. We look at ourselves and we start to open our mouth, and all of a sudden something negative comes out. I was listening to this lecture by Kadamba Maharaj, and he was saying that his mother used to tell him a fairy tale about these two stepsisters, and one of them got the blessing from a fairy that whatever she spoke, flowers and jewels would come out of her mouth. And the other stepsister, frogs would come out of her mouth. So he was saying, this is basically the same thing here, that sometimes you're speaking with the Vaishnavas and you're giving all this nice Vaishnav flowery language, and then sometimes the frogs pop out and you can't get them back. So the reason for this is that we are triggered. Oh, you put it up already. No. So trigger is kind of a common word these days. Basically, it refers to losing our position within our higher self. And it's losing that prefrontal cortex part of our brain that's very wise. As we age, we're supposed to develop more insights and more reasoning and logic. But somehow or other, there's, when we're triggered, we often move back into a different part of ourselves that's more childlike version of an adult. Because in our life, very often we experience traumas. Usually when people think of triggers, they think they get triggered because of some kind of previous trauma. It's not usually those big T traumas, like the earthquake or the whatever, that's triggering us in the everyday interactions. It's those little small T traumas, that when you were a kid and you felt hurt and your mother, something else was more important, and she came to you later, you feel some abandonment, or maybe we feel more intrusion, we get yelled at, we're told we have to think a certain way, all these little kind of traumas that are a little bit hurtful, and then we figure out how to deal with it as a kid. And so as we grow up, we kind of like cobble together some kid's version of what an adult's supposed to be, because you try to deal with those things yourself, but not always so successfully. So most of the time our triggers, they come from this part of ourselves that's kind of cobbled together all these adaptive strategies to cope in this world, instead of, the wise adult self that we are most of the time when we're not triggered. So that's a big part of why we have difficulties in our interactions, why that anger comes up, why we still keep boiling away even though we got the big fat roll of Canadian duct tape. We know not to say it, but still we're thinking it. Or why we get those situations where we just can't cope with something and we withdraw and we don't interact with other people in a healthy way. That's all because of just some ways we've learned to adapt to difficult situations in a kind of a childlike way. And so that's our, kid version of an adult that's basically reacting at those times. So the part of you that I hope that we are speaking to right now is that wise adult part, so that you can thoroughly understand what we're speaking about and be able to apply it in your life. So most of the time when our interactions are not going well, it's because that other part of ourselves is taking main stage in the interaction, and we're not realizing that. So my husband's going to explain. Oh, okay. So, I forgot we were going here. So, sometimes we call this lower self. You know, Bhagavad Gita says that one should try to conquer over one's lower self with one's higher self, and thus conquer over lust. So lust is also one of those all-encompassing words. Basically, lust is, I want it my way, just the way I want it. That's the basic definition, and all the expansions around that. So when we're in that adaptive child, we adapted to somehow or other make an adult body out of our childhood experiences. That's what is happening when we are responding from our lower self. So from our lower self, our thinking is going to be black and white. It's this way or that way. We're also going to be perfectionistic. We can be a little bit relentless in what we need. We all know kids, you know, when they want that sweet before dinner, they're relentless, right? Same ideas. We get very rigid in our thinking. You know, there's only one way, my way. And very often we can become harsh in our language. Usually we find our demeanor's a little bit hard, and not surprisingly, if you looked closely, your body would probably be a little bit hard too. If you were introspective enough to notice it, you'd probably be feeling quite tense. Usually we're very certain that we're right. My husband always says, "Why do you always think you're right?" And as I explained, tight in body. And we're usually short-term thinking. You know, Shreyas and Prayas. We just want what's beneficial for us now, you know. So those are the symptoms of when that part of us is the player in the interactions. What we are striving for through the practice of Bhakti Yoga is that our higher self is the participant in the interactions. And so when we're in our higher self, we will see that our thinking can be nuanced, we're very realistic, we're forgiving, we're flexible, we're warm, yielding, humble, our body's more relaxed, and we can be more long-term thinker. So what we are striving for in Bhakti Yoga is the characteristics of a person in their higher self. So if we take, for example, one of the things from the adaptive child, we take harsh. So the qualities of the adaptive child are that maybe when we were a kid, they were effective because we couldn't do anything else. But as an adult, they're very dysfunctional. We don't quite see that. We're still thinking they're going to work. If I'm, you know, rigid and persistent, my mom's going to give me that cookie, you know? However, as an adult, it doesn't really work. So if you take harshness, we think if we're harsh, we're going to get our way. However, there isn't any redeeming quality in harshness. There is absolutely nothing that harshness can accomplish that if you look on the other side, that firm, loving kindness won't do much better, way better. We can still be firm, but we do it in a kind and more gentle way. It's going to be much more effective than harshness. So we want to really be aware of what part of ourselves is engaging in interactions with others if we want to have healthy relationships. So a big part of this You want to add something to that?
You know, in terms of our Vaishnava theology, if we examine the typical behaviors in the lower self, those are behaviors of conditioned life. Those are behaviors of the modes of material nature. And in conditioned life, one would think those behaviors are normal.
Yeah.
In Vaishnava theology, we understand the activities of the higher self and how much more beneficial they are to our emotional, spiritual, and physical health. And therefore, in Vaishnavism, we strive towards the mode of goodness, which results in these qualities exhibited in the higher self.
Thank you. Just one second.
Okay.
I was describing these to one of my clients one time, and he said the descriptions of the lower self, he says, that's everybody that I know at work. We're all functioning from that column. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. So when we started out with the Grihastha Vision Team, we considered skills that were necessary for good communications and good relationships. And as we've been going through the years, we're starting to ask ourselves this question, are skills enough? So skills are essential, and practicing Vaishnava etiquette, next one, is really awesome. And we are here today to help you find out why the heck you're not using them. So we have just a little introspection for you right now. And it's something that you can actually do every day for like a week or so, just to get you thinking in a different direction. Maybe right now you can note down some circumstance, how you behave when you're in your wise adult, and when you lose it and you get more to that adaptive child thinking. What do you do? Like, what kind of behaviors do you do? I know I get a little grouchy and I get a little controlling, and like we all have our behaviors that we go to. And then there's the part of me that's, when I'm in my higher self, I'm very flexible. People can do their things their way, very open. So we have these different ways that if we look at ourselves, we'll see what's our behaviors in both of those. So write it down, and what do you do when you're in one and when you're in the other? So by recalling some incident where you acted out, that can help you visualize how you are when you get in your lower self. And just a second. And when you think back and you think, okay, my lower self got the best of me. How did I act? And you're a little bit embarrassed. So when you think about that, just take a breath and visualize what you could have done differently in that circumstance. How could I have, done it in a different way? And then a big part of it is to forgive ourselves for blowing it, because we all got to learn. So we want to forgive ourselves when we lose it, because we do have to be kind to that adaptive child part of us. Because when you're a kid and you're just trying to figure out how the world works, you're doing the best you can, and I can guarantee you probably did a really great job, because you're all sitting here today engaged in devotional service. So they worked for us somehow, but not all of those things make for very good Vaishnava etiquette. And so when that other part of ourselves sneaks in and we say the thing that we wish we didn't say, the frogs popped out, we need to take a breath and just forgive ourselves. Of course I did that. I practiced my whole life doing it. It's just my habit. Of course I have a tendency to do that. And I can do it better. So when you keep track of, when you do things from your higher self, and just for a week note down, the few times, when we blow it, it keeps you more aware of noticing. Because sometimes we blur those two selves. We think that those ineffective behaviors are the thing that we're supposed to be doing. And we don't quite realize that they're not that functional. So until you start to actually look at it, with the help of seeing the differences on that chart, you'll go, oh, maybe that wasn't the best way to do that. And so it's not that we have to become perfect right away, but just by being aware of it, we will automatically start to change. It's not that we have to force ourselves to change right now. That awareness will enable us to naturally make those changes.
And if you keep track, you can actually do this on a daily basis. Just try to make a mental tally how much time you spent in your higher self and how much in your lower self. And what were those two experiences like? What did they feel like? How did you feel? And in Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Param Drisva Nivartate. He describes how by experiencing a higher taste, you can become fixed in consciousness. So as we begin to learn to live more in the mode of goodness, these types of behaviors of the mode of goodness, we're naturally going to gravitate that way automatically because it's so much more satisfying and rewarding. So that's very important. Actually, the slide for the hand model somehow. No, this is next. I don't know what happened. So I'm just gonna plug up the screen for a sec. So it can be difficult to, as Uttama was saying, sometimes we get triggered and it becomes very difficult to be in the higher self. And I'd like to explain something to do with the physiology and the psychology of how the brain works, which can actually help us to be a little more emotionally or a lot more emotionally regulated and be able to stay more in the higher self in moments where it could be potentially difficult because we're triggered by different things, and usually it's some kind of subtle trauma things. So if you just hold your hand up for a second and just take a look at it. Okay, so you got your fingers and your thumb there. We're just going to have it like two parts. So if you can just imagine, your brain, the top part of your brain, you can put your hand down if you want now. Yeah. The top part of your brain is called the prefrontal cortex, and that would equate to your fingers in this model. So the prefrontal cortex deals with logic, reason, compassion, rationality, a very valuable part of the brain, very important part of the brain. And Srila Prabhupada said the brain is like an instrument. The brain is an instrument. We understand from Bhagavad Gita how Krishna says knowledge actually, he is residing in everyone's heart, and from him comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So real mode of goodness, pure goodness, higher intelligence, it actually comes from the heart. And even modern science and also the Puranas describe that between the heart and the brain there's something like 40 to 80,000 neurons that carry messages from the heart to the brain. And the brain is processing it, particularly the higher part, the prefrontal cortex. So that top part of your brain, prefrontal cortex, it's on the top, and underneath you can just look at your hand for a second. Just put your thumb in there, fold your thumb in, then put your fingers over top of your thumb. So we could call that the hand model of the brain. And you open it up inside, just peek inside, there's your thumb. The brain is an incredibly complex instrument, but we're going to break it down really simply. And the lower part of your brain, your lower self, could be represented by this little... Okay, the lower part of your brain will be... What? As a part. Is more correctly, as a part of your complex brain. So that part of your brain... Okay, we'll call this, it's called the amygdala. and it stores almost all experiences that you had in your life. And the way it functions, just like you're a child, one time you were a child, and all of us probably touched a hot pot, maybe we put our hand over the ghee lamp too long, got burnt, a little burnt. And as a child, that memory was stored in this lower part of your brain, the amygdala. That memory was there. The next time you saw a pot or a flame, that part of your brain kicked in and you just automatically knew not to touch it. Another way that can function, let's say you were in a house that caught on fire and there was smoke and you saw the flames, there were huge flames and it was spreading very fast. That part of your brain would kick in. That lower part of your brain, the amygdala, it deals with fight, flight, or freeze responses. So it's a very important part of your body. It kicks in, it causes your brain to produce adrenaline and cortisol, which send all the energy of your whole being towards your core organs so that you can fight, flight, or freeze. So in the fire instance, it just gives you the strength and determination to get out the door as quick as you can. So in that situation, it serves you very well. Very important function. A side effect of that adrenaline and cortisol that is produced by the amygdala in that situation is the higher part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. If you look at your hand again, you want to hold it up. The adrenaline and cortisol flood your whole brain, and it causes that prefrontal cortex to go offline. And do you know the expression, sometimes people say, I flipped my lid? That's literally what happens. You disconnect from your prefrontal cortex, from your logic, reason, compassion, kindness. It goes offline. You don't need that when there's a fire. You just need to get out. So some circumstances, that fight, or freeze mode, it's invaluable. But in some circumstances, it causes problems. So what might happen, maybe I was in that house that burned, maybe it was a blue house, and it was just a traumatic experience. Maybe some people live and got hurt. It would be very traumatic. So maybe even 10, 15 years later, I'm invited to someone's house, I get out of the car, I look up the driveway and it's a blue house, the same color as that house that the fire was in. I may not even consciously remember that incident in the past, but because my lower brain, the amygdala, is triggered, you will literally feel the same fear, the same sense of urgency that you felt in that original incident. You might even smell the smell of the smoke. What's happening is that experience from the past becomes projected into the present. So although those two situations are no way equal, the amygdala reacts and you get triggered. Similarly, maybe as a youth, or maybe I had a really horrible teacher in the really low grades who was saying things like, you're dumb, you're not good at anything, you're stupid, you're not a good achiever, your grades are lousy. If one has received a lot of those kind of negative feedbacks as a youth, again, that can be stored in this lower part of your brain. And then later in life, especially in close relationships, someone might say something like, why did you leave the bathroom light on? Maybe just the words are a little harsh, but it's not really that big of a thing. But because of that experience stored in the brain from the past of being ridiculed and criticized, all that past experience also becomes projected, and then I might just totally flip out and get angry over some small thing. Either that or I'll completely do the freeze thing and withdraw. So that aspect of the relationship between the lower self and the higher self, the amygdala storing experiences and projecting them into the present, it can cause problems in our relationships, especially our close relationships, because how many people here go in Harinam? a lot of people. So sometimes the devotees go in Harinam, and you might experience, you're out on the street, and someone might say, oh, there's those crazy Hare Krishnas. And that comment just rolls off like water off the back of a duck. Because you have no relationship with that person. They're just in the modes of material nature, and doesn't really bother you. However, as someone who's very close to you, very dear to you, even a friend, they're fairly close, if they say something negative to you, it's going to hurt more. It's going to hurt more. And especially if you've had that kind of, we'll call it small t trauma as a youth, that you were criticized, ridiculed, it's going to get amplified. And so because it's amplified, you get escalated, your higher self goes offline, and therefore, as Uttama was saying, your conversations are going to be completely unproductive because you've lost touch with your higher self, and again, the higher self is connected to the heart, so you lose touch with the heart when you're escalated. And I think if you just think for a minute, if you had that experience when you get really escalated, where do you sense that? Some people feel a burning in the head, sometimes chest's tight, palms get sweaty. We might experience that in different ways. But if we can realize that you're about to flip your lid, you're about to lose touch with your higher self, important thing you can do is to realize that, and to realize that you can control that. And the way to control it is to realize it, and then B, to take a time out. Because what's happening, your body is getting flooded with this adrenaline and cortisol, and physiologically, the way the body works, it can take a minimum of 20 minutes for that adrenaline and cortisol to get filtered out of your bloodstream. So if you find you're having one of those conversations where you're getting heated, and especially if both of you are heated, if you just realize we are flooded, our higher self is offline, we need to take a time out. And you take a time out, your higher self comes back online. It's just like rebooting a computer when it freezes. You go back online, calm down, you can come back and have a rational discussion. We've taught this to many, many couples, and we often get feedback that just understanding how the brain works, how you can self-regulate by taking a time out, they said it was a game changer for them, a complete game changer.
The problem is that when you don't realize what's happening, then sometimes when one of the people wants to take that time out because they realize I'm just not in a state where I can speak rationally, the other person gets frantic. You don't care, you don't want to work this out, don't go. So when you realize that, well, number one, we do have to be committed in our relationships to come back and work it out. But when we realize that that adaptive child part of ourselves doesn't really have any interest in relationships, they just want it their way. So when you're both or one of you is in that state, it's not possible to have a productive conversation because it's a one-way. We're only thinking about ourselves at that point. We're not capable. So just to realize that we're all like that, and it takes everybody's body 20 minutes minimum when you're really upset for that cortisol and adrenaline to come out. It's just human. It happens to me, it happens to you. It's not that anybody's a freak. All of our bodies work like that. So it's just knowing how your body works and work with it. You know, like you can't make a machine do something it can't do.
And as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, yantra rudrani maya, we're actually spirit souls sitting in a machine. He calls this body a yantra. And so you have a vehicle, you drive a car, you need to know a little bit how to run it. A few basic things: steering wheel, ignition, brakes, a few lights on the dash. In the same way, we have this body, which is a yantra, it's like a machine. If we can understand a little bit how it operates, it can facilitate us getting to our destination.
Just one more thing about, we'll take your question one sec. We were showing the smoke alarm up there because most of the time when we're getting upset, it's like the smoke alarm. You know, the smoke alarm's for when your house gets on fire, but all you did was cook a chapati and the smoke alarm's going off. So most of the time when we're getting upset, it's a false alarm. When we're in our adaptive child, we think it's all a really big deal. So when we kind of realize that it's probably just the smoke alarm going off, it's a lot easier to take some strategic measures. So if your response is bigger than what the situation warrants, you're like this. You're in your adaptive child because you've brought in all those other things. Somebody like to pass the mic there for the question?
I'm sorry I'm asking this question, but often not when...
You don't have to be sorry. You're here so you're going to learn. I'm glad you're asking a question.
So often not once we are in a heated discussion, a ruffle, or when we are in a situation, this so happens that even if we take 20 minutes of break, our brain is still running the same script.
Yeah.
Say, for example, I had a heated discussion with my friend, and I take 20 minutes break because I know that my higher self is not connected. Yet, that in that 20 minutes, the whole situation will run, and I'll be running the same script of what just happened.
So that was...
Can I ask you a question? Do you drive a car?
I know how to drive.
Do you know this little red light that comes on sometimes on the dash?
Yes.
And usually it's the engine overheats?
Yes.
If the engine overheated, would you keep on driving?
Yeah, the car will stop running.
Well, it would stop. If you kept driving, it's going to seize up. I know. My point is, just like if that red light goes on, you know you should stop and let the car cool down. You don't keep driving. So when you have those kind of heated conversations, you take the time out. But if you're thinking about it, you're still driving, and the motor's still heating up, and it's not going to work. You have to separate yourself. Find something to do that's going to relax you.
So,
Chant Hare Krishna, go for a walk. Go ahead.
Yeah, we didn't go into the whole scenario of the timeout. So the 20 minutes is minimum. Depending on how worked up you are or how big that issue is for you, it can take longer. And in a little while later, we're going to give some suggestions for how to take a timeout. One of the things that you do need to do when you take the timeout is to consciously try to relax yourself. And one of the best things that you can do is to take deep breaths. Because when you can do a longer out breath, that slows down your amygdala, because your amygdala works like, 500 times faster than your prefrontal cortex. So that's why it kicks in fast. So when you can take a deep breath and a longer out breath, and 4 or 5 of them, that can slow down your amygdala's functioning and give time for your slower, more rational, wise thinking prefrontal cortex to come online. So when we take the break, we don't want to be thinking about the things. I told that to someone and they said, "You mean I can't put more arrows in my quiver for when I come back for the fight?" No, we need to think of something else, sing at the top of your lungs, do something else, and don't think about it. Or you won't, as my husband said, stop it from overheating. Good question.
A follow-up question. If I say right now, don't think about pizza, the very thing that I'm going to think about is pizza. So if I'm going to say to myself, don't think about it, the very thing that I'm going to think about is the thing.
Because you don't want to talk to yourself, you want to have a strategy. You want to go and know that when I'm thinking about pizza, I'm going to go drink water and I'm going to walk outside. You have to have your strategies. I've had to lose weight, and every time you feel hungry, you drink water, because most of the time you're thirsty. Your body's just thinking it needs to eat. Well, we can take the questions when you have.
Hare Krishna. Can you explain, please, more what this adrenaline and cortisol, how does that work? What does it do? And how is it connected with the prefrontal cortex shutting off? Please, thank you.
Adrenaline and cortisol, they give you energy, and also it sends energy to your core organs, because you need to get out, you need to escape, maybe you need to fight, whatever it is. You need that energy there. You don't really need energy to try and understand, well, okay, the building's burning, but there's nice artwork in here, it's really beautiful, and you don't need that part of your brain. So it actually turns that off so you can do that one function of either fleeing, fighting, or just freezing. So it serves that purpose. And it's a natural process that it just shuts off the higher part of your brain.
Okay, thank you.
That's its purpose.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. It might be a stupid question, but is there any
Okay, we're going to stop this. Nobody gets to say, sorry, this is a dumb question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What do you want to say, sir?
Because
You can say,
you are valuable and your questions are valuable.
Yes.
And having you understand things well is the purpose of this course. So thank you for asking a question.
My question is there any special situation or circumstance where being in lower self is okay?
in that fight, flees mode, if there is a fire, a super big emergency, very dangerous, you actually need to get out quick. And so that serves you well in that purpose. It serves you well in that purpose. Other purposes, when it is applied in the wrong circumstance, triggered as we were describing by trauma, subtle or gross trauma, that's when it becomes counterproductive. So it does have a purpose, it does have a value, but it needs to be properly applied, and we need to recognize when it's acting in our favor and when it's acting against our real interest.
It's our survival mode. So when you're born, the lower part of your brain's fully functioning. The prefrontal cortex develops over time. And it's not fully developed. Well, it used to be 21. That's why the voting age was 21, because someone could make a rational decision. But then some smart politician figured out, if I lower the voting age to 18 and they don't really think rationally, I can give a big hype and they'll vote for me. So nowadays, it's 25 or 27 because of the wonderful advancement of technology. So it does take a while to develop that prefrontal cortex. The lower part of your brain, it is there to keep you alive. It is very valuable also. So you'll see a baby when they're hungry, they cry. Then mom knows, hey, you better feed this kid if you want to stay alive. So it's valuable. Back there.
Hare Krishna. So most of us getting distracted to take pictures of this presentation. So my request is, if we can get the presentation after the session, that will, by this way we can focus on the listening part. That will be great,
Yeah. So we just needed to get everybody's emails by registering you when you came in, and then when it's over, we will send you the PowerPoint. One more question up here.
I had a follow-up to Nityananda's question. Are there any social situations where your lower self can protect you or be good for you or like serve you?
That could save you? A social situation where your lower self can save you?
Yeah.
You're saying? Well, definitely, if someone attacks you, you're... defend yourself, and that amygdala would kick in and give you the strength to punch the person right in the head if you had to.
Also, the gut feeling, and you just got some intuition, that is a little bit coming from your lower self, and you can utilize it to give information to your higher self. So in those social settings, it is good. That's why my husband was explaining a little bit, where do you feel it, when you're starting to go offline? Because your body has stored all the impressions also. So sometimes we don't consciously know what the situation was, but we have this stored impression in the body. So you can be walking, past some dark alley a little bit late at night, and you're just going by that alley and you get this really weird feeling, because your gut feelings, it can be valuable, right? That maybe I should cross the street and go around, or, put my cell phone on, or whatever you do. I'm not from the city. I only know how to look out for the bears, but... Did that answer your question?
Hare Krishna? Okay, that's better. So my question is about how somebody else may be receiving either your higher self or your lower self, or in which mode the interaction may be in. So, for example, sometimes if you're trying to interact with somebody and you are using a behavior that's more to your higher self, you're being more nuanced, you're being more kind, firm, gentle, but they don't receive that well, and in fact what they do respond to is your lower self.
I would think that they're in their lower self and you're in your higher self. Because when you're in your lower self, not only can't you act relationally, you can't perceive relational endeavors towards you either. That's why they can't perceive it, and they're mistaking it.
So what would you do in that situation? Because all they do respond to is things that are maybe not so kind, or something that is more firm than what maybe I would like to.
I'm sorry you're feeling like that. I have another meeting right now. Could we talk about this later? Give them some time to get out of it, to, cool down. It is hard. Sometimes you have to deflect it. And one thing that you can do is try to find their need. So when they're a little bit upset, they're upset for a reason. There's something that they're not getting that they need. So if you can take a guess what that is and say, so I'm guessing that you're upset with me because the boss has a deadline and you're just worried that, our team isn't going to get it in and you're really going to get the sauce, and so, you're worried about the boss. And they go, yeah, I am. Sometimes that just helps them to see what it is, because when we have an unmet need, we tend to have negative behaviors. So there's a fellow, Stephen Rosenberg, he does nonviolent communication, and he says we all would like to act in our best selves, but when there's something that we just don't have that's very essential for us, we tend to have negative behaviors. So when somebody is exhibiting negative behaviors, there's usually something that they need. So if we can take a little guess and say, are you upset about the boss? Or no, I'm not upset about the boss. I'm upset because, they'll start to tell you and then they'll switch.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
So we're going to just explore a couple other pitfalls that can sabotage our sense of connection. And they are grandiosity and shame, which are related to our self-esteem. So in the center here would be a healthy sense of health, a healthy sense of self-esteem. And we understand, according to our Vaishnava theology, that we are all eternal spirit souls in quality one with the Lord. So we all have very unique spiritual qualities. Everyone is created by Krishna with unique abilities and talents and characteristics and quirks. And everyone, in the eyes of Krishna, is extremely valuable. And someone in the mode of goodness, a self-realized soul, he sees all living entities equally. So as Vaishnavas, we aspire for that consciousness of seeing everyone as equal. So in that consciousness of the healthy self-esteem, we see everyone as same as. Everyone is spirit soul. And with that understanding, we have a warm regard for others and also for ourselves, because we're also spirit souls. We are also valuable. They're valuable. However, if we've had that kind of demeaning experiences, especially as a youth, it can kind of erode our sense of self-esteem. And we're going to refer to that as kind of feeling one down, feeling less than, feeling unimportant, feeling not worthy. And in that state, sometimes we even would have contempt for ourselves. And probably the most severe manifestation of that would be, toxic shame. Even sometimes to the point they've so much lost their sense of self-esteem, they're just infected with this toxic shame, and they'll even do things like self-harming. People will cut themselves, and it's very tragic, very sad. And the worst scenario would be someone is so much infected with toxic shame that they commit suicide, which is incredibly tragic. They've so much lost contact with their sense of self-worth. So we want to be healthy. We don't want to have that one down mentality. On the opposite side, we don't want to have this one up. So one up in terms of self-esteem is, I have great self-esteem, and my self-esteem, I'm actually better than you. You're a little lower than me. I'm more advanced than you. I have more resources, more stuff. I just kind of see you as less. So that's the one-up or grandiosity, and even to the point of contempt. Like we see racism, people being judged for so many different things. We have a very judgmental society. Even our educational system, it's based on something called the IQ system. That this person has a high IQ, this person has a low IQ, the person with the high IQ is better. In reality, the IQ system was developed by someone named Alfred Binet, who developed that system, the IQ test, for the French educational system to measure the efficacy of the schools. So his intent was you would administer the test at different times during the year, and if he didn't see that the students' IQ or learning was improving, he said, okay, there has to be something we need to improve in the educational system. That was why that was developed by Alfred Binet, but now it's used just to put a label on a kid and he's judged. And that's tragic. So that's another example of grandiosity, of misuse of what self-esteem is. So again, grandiosity and toxic shame are very harmful. And those also can result from this kind of either big T or small t trauma. If you've been treated harshly, and you might have growing up thinking that you're less, you're not really a good person. The other outcome of that kind of trauma, big or small, will be, I saw my primary caregiver always putting me down and ridiculing me. Well, now that I'm an adult, I can do the same to others. You repeat the same pattern. So those things are tragic. And if we can recognize where those behaviors come from, we can actually learn to regulate them. So unhealthy self-esteem, we find substitutes for self-esteem. And one is performance-based. We'll think that will be worthy of respect and people's attention if I perform very well, if I become the best athlete, if I get the highest grades, if I get the best position in my corporation, then that will boost my self-esteem and I will feel good. It's not that you don't want to do good in school, it's not that you don't want to succeed in your career, but you want to do it in a healthy way. Your self-esteem is not based on that. That's based on your endeavor. That's something different than who you are. Your self-esteem is who you are as a spirit soul. So that people whose self-esteem has been undermined may tend to go towards that performance-based substitute. Another is attribute-based. If I
Can I
have...
just say something
Yeah,
about
go ahead.
the other one? The problem with the performance-based is that we constantly monitoring ourselves to see how good we are based on our performance. And so we can very often lead to workaholism, obsession with succeeding at any cost, like that. It has very many detrimental effects.
And the other substitute is attribute-based. Attribute basically means stuff. If I can get the newest Apple Watch, this computer, if I drive this kind of car, wear this brand of clothes, it's a substitute for real healthy self-esteem. You might wear nice clothes, but that's not who you really are. You are a valuable spirit soul. The clothes don't make you valuable. The clothes don't give you self-esteem. It's who you are as a spirit soul. So thinking that those things will improve your feeling of self-esteem, it becomes illusory because those things are temporary and they're going to change in time and you'll tend to lose that self-esteem. It'll become very illusory. We have one example in the Srimad Bhagavatam of Hiranyakasipu, if you know the pastime of Prahlad Maharaj. He controlled everything. He owned everything in the universe, and still he was unsatisfied. So things, even to that point of owning everything in the universe, will not satisfy you. That is not your real self, or that sense of self-esteem. So it's very crucially important to realize that we are spirit souls. We are all very valuable in the eyes of Krishna, and we should see all others as having that same value. And this is a very difficult world we live in because we are bombarded continually with information that's trying to make us believe that stuff is going to improve our life. It's not going to improve your self-esteem. That's very dangerous misconception. We can use stuff in Krishna's service, but it's not going to change our self-esteem.
And sometimes it promotes like vanity and greed, like you see in Hiranyakashipu, and impetuous decisions. Sometimes even risk our health because we have to have this or that, or look a certain way. So it can be very detrimental.
And the other substitute is, whoops, why did that happen? It's called other-based. Take your question in a minute. Other-based is that men tend to fall in this, well, but men too. Men tend to fall into it, that if people think I have like big muscles, then people will look up to me. That's going to bolster my self-esteem. And that goes to the point nowadays where there's a huge problem in many countries that young men are so obsessed with this concept that if I have a big muscular body, it's going to improve my ego, my sense of self-esteem, that they're taking steroids or performance-enhancing drugs, and it's causing incredible health problems to a lot of people because these things are extremely bad for your health. But that is not where, again, our self-esteem is who we are. And so it's okay to be healthy, okay to work out, but that's not going to improve your sense of self-esteem. And also for ladies, you can explain that.
We tend to go to the people-pleasing. If people think we're good, we're good. Or same thing with the looks, right? Like, you're only good if you look good. So your self-esteem is based on what other people think of you, not on who you actually are.
self-esteem me or you?
Hmm?
So healthy self-esteem. Should we take questions, or how are we doing for time?
You want to just talk about that?
Yeah. Okay, we're just going to talk about this first, then we can take a few questions. So we just want to take a look at healthy self-esteem. So again, self-esteem comes from the inside out. It's who we are as eternal, very unique, very wonderful, beautiful spirit souls, each and every one of us. And it's internal, it's an ontological fact, it's the way Krishna created us. That can't be separated from us. You cannot lose your self-esteem because that is who you are as a spirit soul. However, something or someone or some things or some people could have caused you to lose sight of your self-esteem. But you cannot lose it. It's there. You simply lost sight of it. Very important. And so in healthy self-esteem, you're going to cherish yourself even if you mess up. To err is human. And as human beings, we're going to make mistakes. So someone in healthy self-esteem is going to think, okay, I made a mistake. How can I repair that? How can I fix it? And how can I move on? Someone with a low self-esteem is going to think, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I lose every time. They're going to just give up, lose hope. Someone who's grandiose, if they mess up, they're going to blame it on you. You're the one that broke that. You're the one that caused that problem.
Because of you.
Yeah. But healthy self-esteem is, you messed up, it's okay, you can fix it and move on. Yeah. And so everyone, you're enough and you matter and you're part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, we are all valuable. So healthy self-esteem is very important because when we get in the either grandiose consciousness, it's very detrimental for relationships because I'm looking down at you, I'm judging you, I'm criticizing you. In the shame-based, the one-down sense of self-esteem, we tend to just shut off. We tend to become walled off from those around us. And both those two are detrimental to healthy relationships.
Just going to break up. Don't move it.
Sorry?
Move it. You're going to break. Leave it there. Okay. So I know you've been sitting for a while. We are going to break for lunch at 1:30. Was that correct? Yeah. All right. So what I'm going to get you to do now is just to stand up and walk around and find a couple of people of the same gender as you and discuss which one of, go back to which one of these, the one before, unhealthy self-esteems, your substitute self-esteems, do you tend to fall into? So if you need to sneak out for the washroom, you're allowed to do that too. So but I'd just like you to walk around for about 10 minutes and just have a discussion with anybody you can find and see which groups you fall into when you get out of health. right, can we gather in again? Huh? Not yet? So some questions come up on what do we do when we find we get in the, you want to shoot it back to the map? Yeah, back one. So sometimes we flip around a little bit. Sometimes we go into the one up, I'm feeling more than somebody else, and sometimes we feel less. So what do we do? So if we find that we're getting a little bit judgmental or a little grandiose towards other people, then what we need to do is to, it's a part of ourselves that's feeling like that. So we reach in, if we feel that that part of us is feeling a little bit grandiose, we reach up and we bring down that part of ourselves into our heart. And you will notice, then put your chin horizontal to the ground. Same as. I am same as, not any better or any worse than anyone else. And if we feel that we're feeling low about ourselves, we reach and find that part of ourselves that's feeling like that, bring it up, put it in your heart, and bring up your chin till it's horizontal to the ground. So because we are all Achinta Beta Beta Tattva, we are simultaneously one with and different than Krishna, but we are all equal. Pandita Samadarshanaha. That is who we are. That is how Krishna created us. So we need to get to that center of health where we realize we are no better and no worse than anyone else. So you can also, if you're finding that you fall into one or the other often and it's bothering you, it can be helpful before you go to bed or when you get up in the morning to just do a few affirmations. So something like, repeat after me. I am worthy just because I am breathing, as are you. I am worthy, like I am breathing, as are you. All right. My attributes don't make me worth more or less than others. My attributes don't make me more or less than others. I am responsible for affirming my and others' inherent worth. I am responsible for affirming my and others' self-worth. And then there was this nice one that was, two over, one more, the last one. I am enough and I matter. I am enough and I matter. So even that one's good enough. And I matter. So it doesn't mean we don't have to improve the mistakes that we make, but inherently we are enough because Krishna has made us. We are part and parcel of him. And we are lovable in Krishna's eyes, no matter how anybody else sees us, no matter what kind of shoes we're wearing, what kind of car we drive, or how much we perform. Krishna loves us because we are part and parcel of him, not because of any of those things. He doesn't care about that stuff. What car you drive, what your job position is. He only wants to have that relationship with you. And so that's how we have healthy relationships with others, when we see each other as having the same value as ourselves.
And falling into these substitutes for healthy self-esteem, we can very easily lose sight of our real values, which are to be, devotees of Krishna, understand our nature as spirit, soul. We can lose sight of that because of unhealthy substitutes for self-esteem.
So now we're going to talk about boundaries. So again, when we have healthy boundaries, okay, let me just, and we're in the center of health, we are going to be not too walled off and not too much in everybody else's stuff or needing other people for our sense of health. So we have, it's our responsibility to protect ourselves from inappropriate influences from others and to protect others from inappropriate behaviors of ourselves. So we have external boundaries and we have internal boundaries. So, like we were saying, if we're too walled off, we're going to have too much containment. We just don't interact with others. And if we're boundaryless, we're not going to have enough containment. We're going to be spilling it all out. And so, when we're overprotected, we may be protected, but we don't have connection. And people on the boundaryless side, it's really important to have connection with others, but we might not have enough protection. So that's why we want to be somewhat in the center of health. And it's going to be a little different for everybody else. That's why the center of health is quite big. We may always tend to be just a little bit more walls up, maybe because of the past. We need it just to feel safe. And for other people, we will maybe be a little bit more open because we need others to feel safe. So the center of health is still there in a proper balance, but it's going to vary slightly for others. So sometimes we can think of boundaries to be like an orange. The outer skin of the orange, that's what protects all the stuff from coming in, the orange rind. And then the white part of the orange is what prevents the juice from running out and making a big mess. So we have our external boundaries and we have our internal boundaries. And did you want to say something? Did you want to say something?
So Tim is going to do a little exercise about boundary. It's called a boundary visualization. Boundaries are also very much linked to our values, and in the subject we're talking now about self-esteem and relationships, there's values that we may have which are very important for our self-esteem and our relationships. And some of those common values we're likely to have is the value of kindness, compassion, respect, honoring everyone. Our spirituality is also a very important part of our boundaries, which is going to encompass that respect and compassion. So as you're visualizing your boundary, those are also a part of this boundary wall that you want to consider when you're visualizing your boundary, is your important values in life.
Mm-hmm. So the protective boundaries, you can do that thing, they're what protects us from the world. We don't let things come in unless we open the door and we choose it. And with healthy boundaries, if something isn't true, we don't let it come in and affect us. And with our containing boundaries, that's what stops us from being offensive to others and saying things that we don't mean or, that aren't nice. And so it helps us to stay contained. So a healthy psychological boundary will keep us connected to others at the same time as being protected. It's very beneficial if we can have a visualization of our boundaries. It helps us to get in the right position. So if you are willing, I would just like you to sit up, and maybe if you're put your feet flat in the ground, or if you like to sit cross-legged, just feel yourself, seated on your chair. Maybe take a deep breath in. Nice out breath. Another breath in. Out. And I want you to envision yourself in a place that makes you feel very happy. You feel calm, you feel relaxed, you feel safe, you feel protected. Maybe somewhere you've been, it may be something that you imagine, it can be a place in your house, it could be a place in nature, anywhere that you see yourself in and you feel very happy and calm and peaceful, and just the place where you want to be. So if you can see the colors in that place, maybe it has a fragrance, maybe the air feels a certain way, maybe it's just the right lightness or brightness, maybe it's not too bright, just whatever makes you feel very happy, comfortable, and this is my place. So when you have that place, I'd like you to envision a little wall around it. It's at least arm's length, maybe a little more than that, distant from you. And it completely encircles you. And it can be made out of anything that you like. Most people, no two boundaries are usually the same. We all envision something different. It can be natural, like trees or flowers or clouds or whatever. It can be something man-made, bricks, one of those clear glass things they put over cakes where you can see the cake but nothing gets in. Whatever fits for you. So you imagine this wall around you, and it's very, very solid, and you can see through it. Even if you've pictured bricks, somehow or other there's, little spaces that you can see through. And this wall, this boundary, is so effective that even if an emotional atom bomb goes off on the other side, you're not even going to know it. And it is very, very strong and protective. And if something comes on the other side of your wall, you can see through it, and it seems like something nice, one of your best friends, and they're in a good mood, you can open it up a bit and let them in. If you're at work and somebody's giving you, a performance review, for sure, you want to keep your boundary up, and you want to see, oh yes, this was true, I could improve, that was true, I could improve. No, they didn't, they're just being too harsh. The expectation's too high. I'm not going to quite let that one in. So we choose what we're going to let in, and everything else, it stays outside. Okay. So you have your boundary wall visualized, and I want you to keep that boundary up for the rest of the seminar. And then I want you to envision yourself where you are with that same wall there, come from your happy place to just this room right now. And then you can open your eyes and your boundary is still there. So if you find that you're the type of person that gets very affected by what other people say or what they do, it can be very valuable when you get up in the morning to just pop up that picture of your boundary wall and, go take your shower and do this and that. And then, your kid's freaking out and, Mom, I hate you, making me go to school. Your boundary wall's up, I know I'm a good mom. The kid's just in a bad state. And, I can not make myself feel like a bad mom. I can just understand it's the kids in that state. Somebody says something to you, you can accept a part of it that's true and think that I can improve that. And if something is just where they're at and they're thinking it should be this way or that way, you don't have to let it in. So to give you an example of this, say my sister comes to visit. I don't have a sister. But say she comes to visit, and every time she comes to visit, we end up in some kind of an argument because she thinks things should be done in ways that we just have different values in life. So inevitably, every time she comes, we have a big fight. She goes home. We don't even text for, a month or so. Then one of us, calls up, and we gradually get her back our relationship until the next time she comes. Okay, so my sister's here again, and this time I'm putting up my boundaries. So my sister says, I'm going to go to the store and get some milk. She says, oh, let me come. And I pop up my boundary. I think, she just wants to get me alone so she can tell me something, right? Sure enough, we get in the car. She's complaining about how I parent, and I should do this and I should do that, and it should be this way and it should be that way. My boundary is up, and I'm thinking, I just don't have the same parenting values as her, and I would never speak to my kids like that or be so harsh. So I say to her, thanks for the input. I'll consider that. Do you want to get some fruit while we're here too? That's how your boundary works. You don't get into the thing. You accept that, okay, she's my sister, she's trying to help. I accept that she's trying to be helpful, but I don't like any of the things, so I'm not going to accept them. So I can still have this relationship with my sister, but it's governed by my boundaries of what I value. And so I don't have to think of her as less a person or give up the relationship, but my boundaries are there. So it's not always easy, but we need to practice. And I know I'm going to get a question about a very hard scenario. Someone want to pass the mic? Ah.
She's not receptive to my boundaries. So whenever I try to implement the boundary, there will be a fight.
Yeah.
She, long distance, she lives in Vancouver. It's for the best, actually, to have that kind of distance. But yeah, I feel like the boundaries that I try to set in place, she's not receptive to.
Nobody's ever receptive to your boundaries.
Oh. Yeah.
No surprise. You keep it. You can keep it. You might have something else. Usually, the other people want to be who they are. They don't want to respect our boundaries. It's up to us to keep the boundary. And that can be hard because people push against our boundaries.
Right.
And somehow or other, though, when we feel also that our self-esteem is in the right place, because we're going to link these two together in a minute, we're able to value her enough that we don't have to have a fight and say, yeah, I guess that works for you, but I'm sorry, it just doesn't work for me. The shorter the answer, the better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Something nobody will respect your boundaries? Did I hear that right?
Well, many people will not.
Okay, that's important to
Sorry,
stress.
thank you.
You clarified that.
It's very common because other people, they want to function the way they function. They don't want to be stopped by your boundaries. Sometimes when we find that people aren't able to respect our boundaries, we need to say, I'm sorry, but I deserve respect, and I'm going to go in another room until you can offer me, until you're in another place. And we do need to do that. And that's very good in the beginning of relationships when people try to push your boundaries. We can just say, I'm sorry, but I deserve respect, and I'm going to go right now. And we can have a, meet again later when we're both in a good space. That's very, very essential in the beginning of long-term relationships, is you want to create that sense of respect very early on in relationships, and that can prevent abusive behaviors later on. So we have to understand that we are valuable and we deserve respect. And we want full respect living and full respect relationships. So that can be a little bit hard when it's your boss or something. We can try saying, I understand that this is very important for you, and if you could say that with respect, it would be much easier for me to carry out what you would like. I'm not saying that you'll always have the position where you can do that, but you may find that it's, how much can you have to judge according to your boundaries, or if it's in some situation where you don't have control over that, we'd want to keep at least the psychological boundary up, that we don't let that damaging behavior in. Because I am part and parcel of Krishna, and nobody can take that away from me. So sometimes we just have to put the, psychological earplugs in. All right. Want to say anything about that? Go ahead.
Some very interesting examples of devotees who had boundaries and situations in the Srimad Bhagavatam. How many people here familiar with Srimad Bhagavatam?
Okay. Everybody?
Most people. So it's a very interesting pastime there about, it's called the sacrifice of Daksha, who had some kind of...
well, Daksha performed the sacrifice.
Daksha
He wasn't
performed
getting
the sacrifice, and
yeah.
he had some emotional baggage about Lord Shiva, and he became incredibly offensive. His boundaries were just, he was grandiose to the max, criticizing Lord Shiva, to the point that his daughter self-immolated. Like, that was a huge tragedy. And he was so critical of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva's followers came, and they had this huge battle. And long story short, Daksha, he not only flipped his lid in that circumstance, but his lid was flipped and his head was replaced with the head of a goat, if you know the pastime. So we don't want to be like Daksha. Another interesting example was Jadabhart, who was conscripted to become a palanquin carrier for King Rahugana, and he was a Mahabhagavat Paramahamsa. His vision was that even the ants they're very valuable spirit souls, and he's carrying the palanquin and he's trying to avoid stepping on the ants. So there's 3 other palanquin carriers who are just going straight, and Jadabhart is like dodging the ants, and the palanquin's going all very rough for the king. So the king gets off and starts chastising Jadabharta severely. And it's described that when Jadabharta was criticized by the king, and it's an example of how his values and his boundary protected him. And it's described that Jadabharta, he felt a little wave of dissatisfaction. Daksha, for him it was like a tsunami. he got agitated. Jatabarta said, just a little blip on the screen. And Jatabarta, he just began to explain to the king that, I'm not fat, I'm not thin, I'm not this, I'm that, I'm pure spirit soul. He just explained to the king the highest transcendental knowledge, and the king realized, well, this is a self-realized soul, and he offered his dandavats. So Jatabarta, he had his boundaries, he didn't let the insults of the king affect him, and he was able to respond in a way that the king could actually hear and realize what the absolute truth was. Whereas Daksha completely got escalated, and it was a complete mess that he created.
So if you tend to go to the boundaryless side, it means that we don't have enough internal sense and of our internal sense of our well-being isn't regulated by ourselves. We're dependent on external stimulus to stay happy. So if somebody says something bad about me, I'm going to feel bad. If they say something good about me, then I'll feel good. And if we feel bad, we're going to try to get them to change their attitude so that I can feel good. And in that way, we can be a little bit dependent, and maybe even manipulating to get what we need. If we're more on the walled-off side, we're going to be avoidant, a little bit dismissive of people, and we're going to think that we don't need any input from the other person, and we'd just rather be behind our wall. It just feels better for us. We don't actually want to interact with other people. So it helps us to feel safer. So we're going to, what are we going to do here? I think it's me, isn't it? Yeah, I did talk about this a little bit. I'm just summing it up. So we want to try to walk around all day inside of our boundaries. And to the degree to which we remember it, we want to put them up. And if something gets heated, we get in an argument with someone, we want to, put up our boundaries so that we can accept what we need to and not get overly swayed by the words of the other person and have it affect our self-esteem. And, anytime we've forgotten it, just pop it up. If we find ourselves getting a little bit heated, we need to pop up our boundaries, take a breath, calm ourselves, pop up our boundary. And we have to practice. Practice and practice some more. Like Mataji was saying over here, they're going to get challenged, and so we do need to practice. So it's been found that many of our relationships are reflections of our boundaries. How much we're letting in and how much we're absorbing, and also how much we're spewing out on others. That's dependent on if we have, proper functional boundaries. So let's see, 15 minutes. Does anybody have any questions on boundaries? Aha, there we go.
Hare Krishna. So my question is, if you set up boundaries and somebody doesn't want to respect them or doesn't like the fact that you're setting boundaries, to what extent do you try and salvage that relationship? This is my personal input, that previously I would think that, okay, if this relationship or friendship, whatever, isn't serving me, and I've tried, a lot to have a healthy balance, but it's just not going anywhere, I would keep a distance.
Yeah.
But I think the more I learn, I realize we are all part and parcel of Krishna. So maybe it's not the best thing to give up on people. So yeah, my question is, to what extent would you keep trying in a friendship or relationship or whatever dynamic it may be if the other person isn't respectful of your boundaries, and not even necessarily disrespectful, but they just don't like the fact that you're setting boundaries, and it just creates a bad energy in the relationship?
It's probably all going to be individual. If it's really very disrespectful of you, like you say, you have discontinued the closer relationship with that person. And sometimes we do need to do that because it really affects us. At the same time, we do live in communities where these people always exist with us. We still have to interact. And so we still need to be, respectful, and maybe we keep a little bit more distance. And I've kind of noticed over time, though, that when you keep the respectful distance, you still interact a little bit, you can start to feel if maybe they've changed or they've learned something, and you can open up a little bit more. But with that person, I better be checking it, right? And so according to how much they may have changed, you can let them in more or less. And we want to, I think, not let down the boundary just for the sake of having, that person in our lives, because we're not acting according to our values then, and we're not us.
Is it part of our responsibility as a spirit soul to try and engage them in more positive behavior?
No.
Okay.
And yes. We can try. So we might try once, we might try twice, we might try 3 times, and then maybe we have to take a little pause and see if they can work on it themselves. Because it's the responsibility of each and every one of us to manage our behaviors. Nobody else can do that for us. So we start out talking about triggers, and it's our responsibility to manage our triggers. We don't buy, you made me do it. You said that, and so that's why I behaved. No. You said that, it bothered me, and I can choose how I'm going to react. I don't have to be mean back. I don't have to feel low self-worth because of it. So we are all responsible for managing our triggers and our adaptive lower selves, and we don't pawn that off on our close friends and partners that they have to manage it for us. And because we're in a relationship, we can try and help them, but it's not our responsibility.
Thank you.
I'll pass it back to Vishaka, and then we'll go over there.
Hare Krishna. For boundaries, how can we set a boundary and protect ourselves from politics or diplomacy at work, or amongst friends or services too? How can that happen?
Again, that's very much dependent upon the exact situation. In terms of politics, especially if you were living in the States, there would probably be a lot of boundaries you would have to put up depending on your political leanings. And again, the boundaries would have to be based on the values of mutual respect, especially that kind of situation. And in terms of political boundaries, that's where the importance of actually having healthy communication and being able to understand someone and respect them, and have them understand and respect you, even though you don't agree on what the subject is. So healthy communication is a big part of maintaining healthy boundaries in relationships and communities, to understand what is making the other individual tick, and them understanding what makes you tick. Because we can understand each other and agree to disagree and be best friends. Whereas if we don't understand each other, we're just going to be maybe enemies for the rest of our life. So healthy communication is a big part of maintaining healthy boundaries, because you can have your boundaries and you can understand. If you're firm in your boundaries, you can understand someone else's point of view without fear. If your internal boundaries are weak, you're going to have a fear to listen to the other person because you're afraid you're going to lose your values. So that means your boundaries are a little weak. But if you're firm in your conviction, your values and your boundaries, I can momentarily put my point of view down and I can listen to you and not fear losing my point of view. I don't know if that answers the question.
I've noticed, like, we live in a community, Saranagati, and there's a couple people that they never get in the politics. You know, you tend to have like-minded people, and you have your kind of like groups where you go to your like-minded people. And there's some people that can just somehow stay friends with everybody, right? They just don't get into the political. They stay neutral. They don't give strong opinions. They respect the other person's. They don't come in arguing one side or the other. So it's definitely an art, and it does have a lot to do with being able to respect people who are different than you. And it's also setting that boundary of needing respect too, because it can be hard when you're in different, you know, small settings. And I think right away, you know, we do have to say, you know, I totally value your opinion, and I do need you to say that respectfully to me. You know, I need a respectful workplace. I'm sorry. You know, you don't even have to say I'm sorry. I just need it. So, Prabhupada once gave the example of a cleaning lady. And he said that there was all these big shots, and they were having a meeting or something like that. And the cleaning lady came, and every one of them just respectfully backed up to let her in. She didn't even have to say a word. You know, she said, she's just a humble cleaning lady. But they all just, you know, offered that respect because they could see if she's doing something. And so that's human nature, to be respectful. And if we're not getting that respect, I do think we need to just say, could we just speak a little more respectfully in this meeting? And if you're finding, you may not have the opportunity in your workplace, but when you see in a meeting that things are getting heated up, I would just request, you know, could we take a 15-minute break because we're all a little bit, you know, too hot here, and let's take a break, take a breather, and come back, you know, in our better selves and try again, you know? Because when you keep at it, you ruin your relationships. If you can take those breaks, and it may be something that you want to set up that rule before your board meetings or your ghosties or your whatever, that as soon as we see that some people are getting a little bit heated up, we are going to respect that you need, and we all need, a little bit of time to get in our best selves, and then we will come back, because we're only going to meet when we're in our best selves. So we don't have control over everything, but the things that we do have control over, we can set these guidelines and boundaries.
Right. So what I heard is a communication, taking break, and being respectful, right?
Yeah.
3 things.
Nice summary, thank you. Want to pass it to this fellow with yeah. Oh.
Letter from a devotee in India who's studying to be a lawyer, and he's gone through that exact situation in his life, witnessed a lot of abuse to his mother, and he's trying to reconcile that very same thing about trying to understand what is Dharma and how does that apply to my life practically in this situation. And he says, he was saying it's literally like tearing him apart, trying to reconcile that. And I just told him that how abuse is the antithesis of Vaishnavism and the Vedas. Abuse is the antithesis of the Vedas. It's the antithesis. and that it can be rationalized as a part of one's dharma to tolerate abuse is an incredible misuse of spiritual knowledge. And Prabhupada would also point out how in the system of varnashram dharma, it became distorted and misused so that one caste could lord it over the other caste. So, like, that's a complete misuse of the system of dharma. And similarly, if we misuse our positions as males or females to lord it over each other in any way, that's a misuse of spiritual knowledge, and that's very tragic that that misuse of spiritual knowledge can be used to manipulate and abuse others. It's extreme tragedy, and it can be is even a worse tragedy when that becomes accepted as a cultural norm.
And also karma.
Right.
There's 5 subject matters of the Vedas, and 4 of them are eternal, like God and the living entity, but karma is not eternal. Karma is changed by changing behavior. So perhaps you're in that situation due to some past karma. However, it's a terrible situation to be in, and you can change that karma by different activities. We were just reading a verse this morning that one of the kings, by mistake, he killed a cow when he was trying to kill the tiger that was attacking the cow. And so he was cursed to become a Sudra in his next life. However, he very sincerely took to Bhakti Yoga, and he changed his karmic reaction so that he actually went back to Godhead in his next life.
It's a very complex subject, and if one has experienced, we're actually going to talk about abuse tomorrow. There's a little section we'll talk about it. But if someone has been abused, it's going to leave psychological scars, and they can be healed, and it's very important that they be healed. And in terms of Vedic understanding, and just to put it in context, Srila Prabhupada once, he was describing how all different kinds of fields of knowledge can be used in Krishna's service, and he mentioned psychology. And he said, when psychology is used completely, solely and wholly in the service of the Lord, he said it factually becomes Hari Kirtan, becomes non-different than Kirtan. So I'm just saying this because sometimes we might have those kind of severe traumas that affect us. We have these scars that get activated in different ways and cause relationship problems, cause internal turmoil. And sometimes using psychology through the agency of qualified therapists, they can help us process that in a way that we won't be affected by it, that by that kind of trauma won't be projected into our current situation so that it sabotages our relationships, and also so that we don't repeat it in our lives and pass it on to our kids. So that's very important. So Srila Prabhupada was indicating that doing that is actually Hari Kirtan, because it's uprooting those kind of abuse creates what's a very tenacious weed that gets attached to our devotional creeper, and it is important to address those things, and it's okay to seek help for that, and sometimes it's very important to seek help to be able to process that and become free from that, because you were victimized, but you're not a victim. You are a spirit soul, and bad things happen to you, and you did not deserve that.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. So my question is as you said, communication is the first thing. Like you can express your boundaries to the person whom you want improvement in the relationship, right? And the second phase is maybe we can influence or request multiple times. But what if even after multiple follow-ups, multiple requests, if there is no improvement, and the worst part is we cannot even leave that person because they are family members. So how to deal with that situation?
Situations, again, are very individual. And sometimes change comes very slowly, And if someone is very disrespectful, toxic, abusive, then the relationship is going to be very problematic. It can be less problematic if we can try to nurture change in our friends, partners, spouses, etc., with compassion and kindness. Oftentimes we try to change someone and we tend to complain or demand. The problem that as soon as we complain or demand, the automatic response is going to be defensiveness. And there's going to be no change if there's complaining and demanding and defensiveness. However, if we can express that what we need from the other person in a kind, compassionate way, and if we have a relationship, we can say how that would add value to our life if they did that. And then whatever small step they do in moving that direction, to give them some encouragement. We had a very dear friend who married a Muslim gentleman who she thought she would convert into a devotee, and she was maybe trying to pressure him, and it created incredible friction in the relationship to the point that she was throwing his possessions out of the house onto the street. And her mother was also, she was a Prabhupada disciple, her mother was a Prabhupada disciple, and she saw what was happening. She said, you move everything back in the house, you have to work this out. So she stopped trying to change him and started to respect him for who he was. And over a period of a few years, he became a Krishna conscious Muslim. It was very interesting. He knows more Bhagavad Gita than many devotees I know. He'll come to class, amazing realizations, ask really interesting questions, wonderful person.
Still has his Muslim practices.
Yeah, his Muslim practices. So the change happened not by trying to change, but by respecting who they were and just encouraging whatever small incremental steps happened in that process of improvement. So sometimes it takes a lot of patience to change someone who thinks differently or has a little different values.
So I think
And we can only request, we can't actually force another person to do something. Human beings don't have the right to tell other people what to do. We can only ask, and if they choose to do it, fine. If not, we have to be detached and find another way to get it.
so what can be that another way?
Do it for yourself, or whatever, or be patient, or get it done in another way, because some people they're not going to be able to do everything you ask for.
So I think patience is the only option, no any other
Yeah.
option is here.
And be nice while you're being patient too, not grumpy. That's another hard one. Vishak.
We'll just take one last question and then.
With the prasadam? Are we waiting for it to come up here? We're going down there?
Okay.
Okay, that's why. We were stalling till we
Yeah,
saw
we're-
it. Okay. Take one more and then we'll...
Thank you for that. So my question is, if there is someone who has just walled himself off.
Can we wait for the siren to go past? Okay, no.
Okay. Okay, so what if there's someone, and I know that that person is blocking himself off, and he's just guarding himself, maybe because of the past trauma or something, and he's not letting someone in, and he just feels like, it's safer to not just, socialize with anyone and just be, just shut myself up. And what we can do from our side to try to, respect his boundary, but still make him feel safe to let someone in.
I was just going to answer exactly what you said. Try to make them feel safe. There's two types of people that are walled off. One is that they didn't learn anything, like they just kind of grew up like that, like your classic Brit, no emotions, everything's just, so they just haven't experienced something. And then the other type of people that are walled off, they've usually experienced trauma, and so it's safer to stay walled off. So with the people who have not experienced trauma, then they just need to be convinced that happiness actually comes by connection with others and experience that. With the people who've experienced trauma, they probably do need a little bit of help dealing with their trauma. So they may need some outside trauma recovery help. And like you said, what we can do is just to be encouraging and ask them what is comfortable for them, and what you can do to make them feel safe. Because sometimes we just don't know. Like, I might feel that, if I go and give him a hug, he'll feel safe. But somebody else, they wouldn't feel that. I would feel safe if you could just, sit down and discuss it with me quietly. That would make me feel safe, right? So you do need to ask the person what can help them. And it is a slow process, in case you haven't noticed.
Thank you.
And being walled off happens in different degrees. And we're going to talk about one little aspect of why sometimes men wall off in a way you can kind of break through that so everyone's comfortable. That's a little teaser for later, after lunch. So how long do we have for lunch?
Hare Krishna, everyone. So we'll be going downstairs for lunch, and please come back by just in exact 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Yeah, 2:05, yeah.